So moving on to my third subject, which is cognitive psychology. And judging by the name, you already know that it's going to be one of the interesting subjects that I have this semester. And the most interesting part of all is that from this subject, I had a Russian lecturer, so she brought in a lot of different perspectives and point of view into the materials because of her origin. So definitely it was some cultural it was first a culture shock there, and second, she brought in perspectives related to cognition that you will never know because we as humans, we are exposed to different cultures, different upbringing, different environments. So it's definitely a great semester with her. And what we learn for cognitive psychology is basically attention, memory, what type of memory, short-term memory, long-term memory, which includes semantics, episodic memories, language, concepts, knowledge, and all of the stuff that is related to the mind, to our thinking, to our cognition. And all these curiosities that we had about the mind, the brain, the physiology, the psychology of the brain can be answered with this subject, even though we only learn like the surface of cognitive side, but it's already pretty sufficient and pretty interesting, and I'm pretty sure in future when we learn in depth it's going to be more interesting, and this subject sets the basis and the fundamentals for our next semester where we learn things that are more in depth and related to this. And for example, like the study tips that I shared in my previous day in the live video, if you want to see, you can watch here. Yeah, those kind of like tips are related to cognitive psych. And if you ever wonder how psychologists read people's minds, or like not even psychologists, if you want to read people's minds, you would first have to understand their cognition really well. So basically, with the knowledge of the human cognition, you will be able to do so. So that's, yeah, if that answers your curiosity whether psychologists can read people's minds or not. And the assignments for these subjects were fine. It was just a lot of research paper, but one of the interesting assignments that I had was a self-experimentation. So we had to use, I think I mentioned this in my previous video as well, in my day in the life where I did the self-experimentation. Basically, we have to use a mobile phone app to test our cognition, which includes memory, focus, attention, problem solving skills, mental agility, all of these things for 7 weeks. And after testing it, we have to write a paper on whether we think that technology can help with cognitive problems or not. So for example, whether technology can help with motor dysfunctions, whether it can help with dementia, all of this, you can write it in your paper that's related to the self-experimentation essay. So this was one of the interesting assignments that I had, and then other than that, we also had to do questionnaire like M&E, and then we had to do a survey, we had to create posters, but it's pretty much similar. I just pinned some of my assignments here, and you can take a look at it. Yeah. So moving on to my next subject, the second last subject for my core subjects, which is cross-cultural psychology. So for this subject, we learn how, it's just a very short and just a more laid-back subject, but we learn how various behavior, emotion, and cognition varies across different cultures. For example, right, people living in a more individualistic culture would be more expressive with their emotions, for like US, UK, yeah, and perhaps their babies would have like less infant temperament because they are expressive with their emotions, while people living in a more collectivistic culture like Japan, China would be less expressive with their emotions and would possibly have like more infant temperament because of how the way they are brought up in. And oh yeah, another interesting thing that we learn is on enculturation and socialization. Basically, how us as an infant, when we start out as an infant, would become who we are today. What makes us who we are today? What is the cultural factors that created us and turned us into who we are? And how is because like we're in a big ecology of different elements, starting from the main point, which is the individual, which is us, and to the bigger system, which is the macro system. So this is like the ecology of it. And one more thing that was really memorable as well was on the cultural adjustment model. So for this, we learned how foreigners feel like when they go to a different country to live either short term or long term. For this, we have to do an assignment and interview foreigners living in Malaysia, non-Malaysians living here, to determine how feasible is this model. But the stuff we learned here is pretty much open up your mindset, and so that you can view things in a different perspectives. And among all the other subjects, this subject is the most chill and relaxing one because the materials weren't really complicated, and the assignments weren't really that difficult, and the lecturer was more laid back for it. And moving on to the very last subject, I put the one that I hate most at the last, and let me tell you why I hate this subject, which is psych testing. Oh my god, it's running out of battery. Let me just switch to my phone for a bit. So I changed to my phone because my camera was running out of battery. So yeah, let me tell you why I hate psychological testing. It's because psychological testing, as you can see from the name here, it's all based on maths, stats, and measurements, and all this down stuff that I really hate at testings. Yeah, it's basically helping us understand more about statistics to help us measure the things that we want to, the variables that we want to measure when we do an experiment, etc. And in this subject, we learn what are the challenges of measuring abstract constructs as in intelligence. How you can't measure intelligence because intelligence is something that has been facing a lot of complication in the past. We generally measure it by IQ, but whether that measurement is correct or not is still very debatable. IQ quotient, how correct, how accurate it is, etc. And then we also learn how to measure work engagement level, all this stuff. And to do so, we are required to use a lot of SPSS. SPSS is an IBM software that we have and that psychologists use to give meaning and analyze data. This is an Excel. It's basically a old 2008 version of Excel. I hate that freaking app. Let me just show you here how it looks like. The software sucks. Yeah, and I really suck at it at SPSS. And I gotta be honest with you, I struggled with this subject this entire semester, and I haven't gotten a single clue what the subject is about or what my lecturer wants. So if you think that going into psychology means leaving maths entirely, I can assure you that is not true at all, because we still have to deal with stats, we still have to deal with measurement, and it's a pain in the ass to deal with this. But thankfully, if you were generally interested in this in other subjects, so this subject is still manageable. Yeah, and for me personally, because I had a lot of interest in the other subjects, so I was able to deal with the entire semester without feeling drained out. And yeah, back to it. So if you're ever thinking about becoming a clinical psychologist, do note that psychological testing, which is psychometric, is a very important element that you need to master. Because otherwise, you will struggle a lot in the future, because when you write report, you will need to use SPSS to run data, to analyze data. And if you don't know how to do that, then you are confirmed fucked up for real. So yeah, it is the end of the video now, and I really hope that through this video, this very dull, boring video, you'll be able to know what we study for psychology, and hopefully it will help with your choices in the future. And if you're ever struggling right now, I hope that you know that it is, if you're ever struggling with psychology, the psychology degree right now, I hope that you know you will be fine. You will really be fine. I mean, to everyone out there, if you're struggling right now, you will be fine at the end of the day. So yeah, if you think this is helpful, then do let me know, do share, and if you have anything, you just always ask me. Yeah, so peace, and see you in the next one.